Welcome in, everyone. We're bringing back another new YouTube video with me, Tom J. Sherlock, joined by the wonderful Himi Garris, otherwise known as Grace. Hello, Grace. How are you?
I'm good. I've had a good day of
Self-care.
practicing my legs.
Smooth like a dolphin, as you
Smooth
text
like
me.
a dolphin. Smooth like a dolphin.
But today
It's
we
when
are...
I'm doing the dolphin shouts. I can't do a dolphin noise.
No, that's not. That's definitely not a dolphin. But anyway, we are here today. Yeah, great start. We've already derailed. We are here to talk about what we sort of our opinions on how EUL has gone this year, and sort of look into detail at each of the teams, starting from the bottom all the way up to the top. And Grace is going to give us her insight into how she thinks these teams and players have performed, whether changes are needed, and then at the end, Grace is also going to predict for us who she's backing to make Manchester. I haven't told you that.
Oh,
I've just
okay.
added that in there. That was just off the top of
love
my
that.
noggin.
Little surprise for me there.
Yeah, little surprise for you. But with the first team we are going to look at is going to be Wild, who currently they sit on 4 points, having played 7 games, lost 6, with their only win coming up against Fnatic over on Skyscraper. We also have the stats for... Oh, that's the wrong button. We also have the stats for the team of Wild this season as well, which I will get up now. And, I mean, everything's in the red, Grace. Where would you like to start with Wild?
Where do I start with that? Like, let's be honest. And I think this is a thing. Everyone, if you said to anyone ever, ooh, how have Wild done this season? It's very obvious how they've done. Like, it's not been good for them at all. It's been grim. Like, super, super grim. There's a lot we can say here. Again, I just want to preface it, like, a lot of the time I think when people see, performance go as badly as this, I think there's a lot of factors people don't consider, and I think that there's often, we saw it last year, actually, started last year with TT9, right?
Yeah.
They had a bit of a stinker with that
Massive
stage 1,
stinker,
to be honest.
wasn't it?
Yeah, huge stinker. Obviously, a lot of work went in over summer. A lot of work behind the scenes. Obviously, they had some roster changes too. I do feel like that initial season for TT9 was down to some stuff that isn't really to do with the game. It isn't to do with anyone's ability. It isn't to do with, anything like that. I think it was more of a social thing. So there is that factor looking at this Wild roster that you have to consider as well. Like, okay, is it that, this is a stinky roster, or is it that there's stuff happening behind the scenes that we don't know? Do I think these players are stinky? No.
I mean, yeah, you can look at Pat Ball last
time,
season. Last year they almost made the major multiple times, didn't they? They lost.
This is it, right? Okay, so this is the issue. I don't like this roster as it is. I'll be honest. Like, I saw that roster and I was like, this just feels like not scraping the barrel, because that sounds really harsh, but it does feel like, okay, let's take the leftovers of what is left.
Yeah, I guess you've got all the other M&M players. You saw Tyrant go to Fnatic, Uzis and Solotov go over to BDS, Nath going to Dark Zero, and Nello's sort of like unfortunately, like the last, when you're at school getting picked for a team.
Oh no. The thing is, though, is like, this is the thing with Nello. Like, Nello is that strong kind of backbone that, we're relying on for a while, but then things had kind of changed in that roster anyway. And I feel like with Nello in particular, it's this idea of when you put someone like Nello into a roster like this, it's because you've gone in, you've gone, okay, he's got a load of experience here that we need, no disrespect against Teb and Lolo, but there's that need sometimes to outbalance the experience level, right? You need to balance it out. And so when people are making rosters, a lot of the time you do hear them say, like, okay, we need something to balance out maybe the inexperience here.
And I mean, that's what they've got with Nello and Kanto, isn't it? It's experience galore. But
I mean, yeah. So I'm not going to get to that elephant in the room just yet. I'm going to wait for a second with the whole Kanto stuff. But Nello, I'm not sure. I don't know how I feel about Nello being in that roster, and I don't know how I feel about, to be honest, like 90% of that roster. I feel like You could take any of these players and build a better roster around them. Do you know what I mean? But together as that 5-stack, it's just really odd, and it obviously hasn't been working. You've touched on this. Packball is a very, very good player. A very, very good player. And I think this is the frustration part. And again, it's not UK bias, it's genuine fact. Like, Packball is a good player. And when you are considering, okay, maybe we need to build something around Packball here. But that's, again, a difficult thing to do when you have a very limited time to do it. My only frustration point is that, especially in terms of, European T2 players, we do have this massive waiting room, right? It is not like we have, there's a few good players in EU T2. There is mountains of them. Granted, you'd still have to try and probably balance it out with some experience there. But again, that's why, Nello is here, right? Kanto.
I mean, he's statistically the worst, as we said before we started filming this, statistically the worst rated player this season in all of the EUL. And
how much of a fall from grace do you have to have before you take a long look in the mirror and go, I need to sort this out? Like, I need to change something, or maybe just that's me done with the player side of stuff. Because, again, like, this is the problem, right? Kanto's a very good player when they're playing good, right? It's not just like, okay, they're having a good day and they're getting like a few kills. No, Kanto will absolutely pop off. Kanto, it has so many titles and so many wins under his belt, but it gets to the point where it's like, I sometimes feel like when players get to that point, it's like, okay, well, what's actually next? Like, you've achieved
where's
everything.
your drive? Where's your
Exactly.
necessary hunger and drive for it?
And I do feel like, without giving too much away, there's a big aspect of that with Kanto. There's stuff that has happened over the years where it makes people think, has he lost that fire in his belly? Has he lost that ability to be like, okay, I can keep pushing myself because I've got this really spicy goal. Like, for every other player in Europe League who hasn't, maybe won a major, who hasn't won SI or whatever,
that's what they're chasing, aren't they? Yeah, they're chasing it, and they want to be on the top of the pile.
Ultimate goal of your career as a player should be that, right? Winning those.
Winning titles, winning majors, making SI, etc.
It's worrisome because I do think there's like, especially when there's raw talent, and the raw talent is there, and it's deep down, and again, proof is in the pudding how much Kanto has achieved over the years, but why have we randomly grabbed him and shoved him into this roster? And it feels like we're shoving him in for the sake of Kanto being a famous player who's famous for being good, and we haven't actually thought about how this is going to work in this dynamic.
Yeah, the logistics of it. I mean, they've also got a 6-player. They've got a 6-man roster. Is it Dudo or Dodo as a six member? And I mean, if you look at Ents, we'll get on to Ents a little bit later, but they've got a 6-man roster and they've switched it up because it wasn't working. And I mean, Wild is a 6-man roster and they're bottom of the league, and we haven't seen this player come in or switch with anyone, when you could argue the majority of them have underperformed this year. But I mean, I think unfortunately in a round robin league, someone has to come bottom. And I think, as you touched on there, I think Wild have just brought these big names, experienced players, stuck them with Lolo, Teb and Patball, and hoped it would work. And it's just miles off what they were probably hoping for, unfortunately.
But again, the main factor there is, okay, what do they do going forward? Because, realistically, okay, maybe you stick with Nello and Packball there. Do I think we've seen the last of Nello? Probably not. But again, it's a frustration point because I really don't know how to articulate what I personally do with that roster without feeling like I'm being a bit too spicy, to be honest.
Well, I think that I wouldn't be surprised if we maybe see some changes to the Wild roster. Gone are the years where you have 3 majors to try and make SI. Now we're down to 2. If you fail at the first hurdle, you need to make the major and go deep to make SI.
Normally, I'd say, normally I prefer that teams stay together and they iron out the kinks, right? And they iron out the issues that they've had. With this roster, it needs to be a rewipe. Like, it's a wipe. I'm sorry. They need to start and build that all over again. And again, the T2 waiting room,
Exactly.
T1 waiting room. Like you got so many players, you know, and even. You know, even this season of Europe League, we've seen these kind of debuts come through from various players, which we'll get to. They've been absolutely fantastic. Like, don't poo-poo them just because they're young and inexperienced, because sometimes it can be that little extra secret sauce that you need. You know,
It reminds me of when I was first trying to
Use
get a
fun.
job. Yeah. It reminds me of when I was trying to get a job coming out of uni, and they're like, "Oh, you need experience," and I was like, "But I'm going for an entry level role. How on earth am I meant to get the experience at this level unless you give me a shot?" But yeah,
I also feel like I don't personally like the way that the recruitment process and the trialing process was working for Wild.
Yeah, it was a weird one because we didn't know whether the players were still part of this team. We didn't really know. They obviously in the open quals for like Malta, Southbridge, etc. They were playing like with different rosters. It was Patball and Tab, but they were playing. I think Adrian and Creeds were in them with them for a little bit. So I think it was just so many things were tried, and I think
Adrian
these
and Creeds were,
and I think they just got given a solid offer maybe from these other teams, and were like, look, this is solid. We know what the project is. We know how it's going to work.
And this is it. Can you imagine if Adrian and Creeds were like, actually, no, like we're vibing with Packball and we want to stay in Wild right now? How much different Europe League may have gotten for Wild? Because it's like Adrian's debut's been amazing, Creeds' debut's been amazing, but those two together, the Romulus and Remus, wombo combo package there, like
the Spin Brothers.
Honestly, like that. It would have been a completely different vibe. And realistically, again, maybe a spicy take here, but I do feel like Fnatic themselves would agree with this, and I do feel like Wild themselves would agree with this, but like that Fnatic Wild game realistically should have gone to Fnatic.
I mean, Nello popped off. Nello had a worldy game. And I think that's what's fantastic about EUL as well this season is I think everyone thought Fnatic were going to romp them. And Wild came out all guns blazing, but it's about consistency, isn't it? And you can't just have one decent game in a eight game round robin.
Right. And again, I hate using this word because I feel like I do use it a lot. And everyone's like, Grace, please, but like it's sometimes like the vibes as well.
Yeah.
The vibes need to be good in a roster.
Yep.
And you know, I'm not saying that Wild are like beating the crap out of each other every day behind the scenes or whatever, or like, you know, BMing each other, but it's one of those things where it's like, obviously, like, you know, you just want to get to the point where everything's working a bit better and you're able to have that professional environment where you can work out what the issue actually is. I'm trying to be really careful with my words.
Well, I mean, we can leave Wild there and move on.
Yeah.
In case you get dangerous with your words. But yeah, I think in summary, I think for both of us, what Wild have done this season hasn't worked. I think changes probably are needed.
Even like, for example, you go onto like the tier 2 statistics from the last like last 3 months of the tier 2 stuff that's happened, right? And there are so many players that you could like snuffle up, right, and shove into one of these rosters. And I do know, obviously, you know, last minute, I do think we were expecting like 10 teams, and last minute it was 9. And there is I think we could all safely assume who that potential 10th roster was going to be. I don't think, I think if you watch anything in Europe, it's, in my opinion, should be pretty obvious who that should have been. But you know, it's this idea, okay, you've still got so many players there to choose from, even outside of that, right? And that is something that I think people need to be maybe a bit more mindful of going forward when it comes to building rosters.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Wild has not worked out, but another team, Grace, that we'll take a look at now, next in our table. As we take a look at the table here, it is going to be 8th place with 5 points. 6 losses as well, only 1 dub for them. They obviously go up against Wild next week on Monday. So one of these teams is actually going to get 2 wins, which will be nice for them. But we're going to look at the Russian Giants, Virtus Pro. And I mean, we'll bring up their stats now as well. Once again, everything in the red or orange for Virtus Pro, which is, I mean, after their performance at SI, the 3rd best rated team in the world. I think I did my predictions for Thrashers Up the Siege, up the siege, up the cummies. Oh, yeah. And we finish. I think I put them down as second or third. And I mean, they've gone completely the other way.
This is a point, right? Nobody could have predicted how this season of EUL went. And that is a good sign, in my opinion, because, it's not this idea of, oh, there's upsets. It means that it's becoming way more competitive.
I would agree entirely. I think that's,
If you're able to have that tournament where anything can happen, it really shows how strong the scene is in that region, right? Where there can be these constant upsets, and obviously, yes, we can put some things down to map picks and maybe some people trolling the analysis, but otherwise it's just like, oh my days, like even like Virtus Pro and G2, to be honest, have had stinkers, let's be honest. And that's not to take away from the great work the other teams have done, but most people would have gone, all right, in the top 3 you've got G2, Wolves, BDS, and VP kind of contending for that top 3, right?
Yeah.
That's where people would have been looking. And what the entire hell has happened here? Like,
I mean, the thing is, it's been close. I've got the stats on my other screen of Virtus Pro's results. They lost to ITB 7-5, Secret 7-5, BDS 7-5, Fnatic 8-6, Wolves 8-7. So, I mean, it's all the games they've lost, apart from the one against Ents, which they lost 7-3.
But this is sort of been... This is why it's like, you can't really sit there and go, oh, this is completely VP's fault. It's the idea of, yes, maybe they've underperformed in a lot of aspects, and they probably feel themselves they have. Does that mean that they have to start changing up the roster? No.
And yeah, I think that's the thing about VP. Like you said, they don't really... I mean, everyone was calling for things to change after Stage 1 and Stage 2 last year, because they won at EUL Stage 1, won at EUL Stage 2, then dropped out in the Swiss Stage twice. And everyone was sort of comparing them to M80, where, they do well, what's the word?
Under pressure?
No, out there in their own region. What's the word? I can't think of it. On their home turf, they do well, but as soon as it goes to an international event, they basically shit themselves and it all falls apart. And I think if SI had have gone in a similar fashion, I think, people would be calling for changes with VP, but they got third place.
I don't think this is the thing. I really don't think they need to change much with this roster. No. For them, it's going to be probably team and psychology stuff more than anything.
Yeah.
And maybe also being a bit smarter with their counter analysis at times. That's really how they should be focusing, I think. Again, you don't need to change this roster at all.
No.
And
I think the big
it's also, the thing is though as well, like, it's difficult for the Russian teams to actually have changes as well, because you've got such a limited pool of players who are actually genuinely good and not just thinking they're good.
No names there. No names. No spiciness there.
The VP roster is a good roster, and I think, household name, everyone loves them. It's just about pushing themselves when it comes to these maybe more difficult and unexpected moments, your adaptability, your flexibility in those moments, because if you're going in thinking, okay, this should, and every team does it, every team's guilty of it, oh, this should be pretty easy and straightforward, and then you're not able to adapt mid-map.
I mean,
that's
for
where
me,
things start to spiral out of control very, very quickly. So it's about working on your flexibility and adaptability within the map. And again, a big part of that would be, I guess, shot calling. But
I mean, I feel like, having watched all of the EUL games this season, VP have been competitive. What they played 7. They won 1-7-5, lost 3-7-5, lost 2 in overtime. The only convincing loss was up against Ents, when Ents went on their demon arc and beat BDS and VP in the same week. I think it's just those. I think this is a complete contrast to Wild, where Wild have looked so far off it, but VP they've only got a -11 round difference for a team that have lost 6 games. Like, I think on another day you would have seen that game against Wolves, which they lost 8-7. They were 4 against 2 on the defense with 30 seconds left in the round, and they lost. And you've got to think, if that was an actual win, because it was quite early in the season, would that be a completely different story for VP? Because it might have given them the confidence, might have switched up the mental a little bit to spark them on in the next games. Like, I think they're close, and I agree. I think in comparison to Wild, I think VP is stuff behind the scenes that they need to work on, not the team that needs changing. I think I agree with you on that one.
I feel like, you know, when it comes to, if this went a bit differently and they won, things would be different. You can say that for every team in this league, to be honest.
True, yeah.
But
well, that's why it's so competitive, isn't it?
That falls into, that's exactly it. That falls into this idea, right, of it's the most competitive season of Europe League that we've seen in such a long time. Like, such a long time. Genuinely. I think the last time that it was this spicy was actually when I was doing IRL watch parties.
Yeah. Bring those back.
In an old theatre. So
sick.
yeah, it was wicked. But like, nice little spread, a buffet. Everyone loves a cheeky buffet.
So we're in agreement then that Virtus Pro just need to work on what they're doing, not the team, and they'll come good stage 2, we reckon.
If they make any changes, I'll eat a sock. Like, I'll just be pissed off about it.
Well, there we go. There we go. Grace eats a sock if VP make a change. But that can move us on nicely to our next team, can't it, Grace? Which is going to be the boys.
The boys
of ENCE. At the moment, it's looking a little bit spicy for ENCE. There's one play day left. As you can see in the table down there, G2 have got that 6th spot. So ENCE have to win, basically, because they're on the same round difference. Even 1 point from losing in overtime won't be enough to overtake G2. They play ITB on Monday the 15th. So they have to win that game if they want to make top 6. Debut season for them. I mean, it started off terribly for ENCE, and then they've just come absolutely bouncing back into it. I mean, we saw them just...
I have got into about 4 very furious arguments with people about ENCE.
Okay.
Like, verbal arguments, because I think they're freaking amazing. I love this team. I love this roster. I think they're honestly, like,
they won Southbreach, for Christ's sake, didn't they?
Yeah, but not just that. Like, that was like a really big part of it. But like, you can see how well they are. Malta was stinky for them. Like, I'm not going to be around the bush about it. Malta was very, very stinky for them, and you can put that down to, okay, you've flown out for a LAN, and maybe there's a bit of an experience dealing with that environment there. They should have realistically done a lot better in Malta than they did. And to be honest, the start of this season, they definitely should have done a lot better than they did. It was a stinky start for them.
I've got to say, I think it was a little bit of pressure. Because when you're that T2 roster as Valor, you're the underdogs when you're going into it. And maybe teams don't prep as seriously for your games, maybe. Maybe there's that edge of... I've spoken to a few players, and maybe it was that sort of edge of, oh, well, we're better than them. We're T1, they're T2. But hence, now they're on the big stage. There is no under-prepping, and they are being taken seriously, I think. And I think the weight of going to Malta, their first event, as a T1 roster... Maybe the pressure just gets to them a bit.
There have been a few moments where I've noticed that people have tried to counter stuff that isn't quite valid when it comes to ENCE. But I do feel like as well, for example, that Wolves game was the really big example for me.
Yeah,
like,
which we watched. When was that? That was on Tuesday.
ENCE should have won that. They should have won that.
Yeah.
It is by the divine intervention of God that Wolves won that. Like, oh my days.
Oh yeah, you've got the Bibu 1 versus 5 post plant, and then you've got P4 and Mowgli going 2 versus 4 with P4 ratting away in
exactly. Like,
electrical.
And even just the fact of the matter is, historically, before, obviously, ENCE used to be Valor, right? And from the last, like, okay, we're April now, so like 4 months, whatever. Labs is a very, very good map for them. And they should have really taken it. And it literally, like, Wolves have been underperforming. Wolves know they've been underperforming massively. Don't know what the hell's going on there. You know, it's been a few months of trolling from them, to be honest. And ENCE 100% should have taken it and could have taken it. The fact that they didn't is a little bit heartbreaking, because I do feel like it would have really set a message, to be honest. on a wider scale if Ents were able to do that. And I think my heart breaks for them there because it is.
Well, yeah, it could literally losing that game against Wolves, which they should have wrapped up in regulation. They'd be in guaranteed top 6 already. If they had won that in regulation, which they probably should have, they would be on 12 points and into playoffs. Now they go into their final play day having to win up against ITB, who look good. And yeah, I think well, if we look at how they started off, they lost 7-2 to Secret, bounced back with an 8-6 win, and that's also a big one, an 8-6 going to overtime against Wild. They dropped a point there, smashed by G2, losing in overtime to Fnatic as well, and then they bounced back on the 1st of April. The only fall in that game was BDS as they got spanked out 7-3 by Ents, and then on the Tuesday, 2nd of April, they beat VP 7-3. They have their rest day, and then they lose that overtime, absolute heartbreaking defeat to Wolves.
But it's also like, I think that this is gonna sound a bit like, I don't know how this is gonna sound, but like Ents for the start of the season have played it way too safe.
Safe, you reckon?
100%. Like it's the classics of the whole like, oh, the Oregon in the clubhouse and me. And it's like Ents are a roster where they do so much better on a map where you can be a bit more hyper aggressive, especially on the attacks, right? Which is why I was like, okay, they're gonna go to their what I see as their golden ones, which is, you know, a bit of border, a bit of labs, and maybe throw out some of the cafe shenanigans as well. Obviously there is the map veto. It's not just, you know, one team going in and being like, well, we're definitely going to play on this, because it does come down to the veto. But the fact that they kept ending up on like your Oregons, your clubhouses a bit against teams where I think they should have taken the jugular bite there. They should have
something
gone
a little
to
bit different, take a gamble. Do you know what I mean?
Like why, like especially with some of the more like I'll say scary teams in the league, like that's where you want to be pushing yourself to these should we call it trap card maps, you know? That's where you want to activate your trap card and
You've
be like,
activated my trap card. Pot of Greed. I summon Pot of Greed.
Draw 2 cards. This is it. Like it's one of those things where it's just like the frustrating point of like, is there just the lack of, you know, confidence there, where you're like, oh, we don't really want to bring this out too early. But it's like, realistically you should have, because then you start with that big bang, right? You start with that big bang against those Titans. You get everyone buzzing about you. They've played it way too safe to begin with, in my opinion. Way too safe.
I think there was also, they've got that 6-man roster, which is going to take a bit of time to sort of iron out sort of what you want as your main 5 as well. But I think Skies he's got the 2nd most amount of kills out of anyone in the league. The only player above him is Uzis. Uzis is the only player with more kills than Skies. Uzis currently on 72 and Skies, as you can see there, on 71. So he's almost the top fragging player in all of EUL, the most kills, and that could get he might secure that next week on Monday.
Yeah, for the last like few months, he's the fifth, one of the 5th highest rated players in Europe as well.
So we think, so to sum it up, Ents, good start, but you want to see them get a little bit spicier with their map picks, but promising things for Ents.
A bit more. And again, I do think that they shouldn't feel bad about the debut they've had, in my opinion. I think that it definitely could have been better. But you're in the big stage now, you're in the big leagues now. There's a lot of things that will be out of your control. I just want to see them get a bit fruitier with it.
Well, I guess to summarise it, it's been a good start, and they got to the final play day with it in their hands to potentially make top 6 and the playoffs. But we'll find out about how that goes on Monday. But our next team we're going to look at, Grace, and one which I think has probably got the biggest following out of anyone in Rainbow Six Siege in Europe. And we're going to have a quick look at G2. Currently in 6th spot, they played all their games. For them to qualify to the playoffs, they just need Ents to lose. Even if Ents do win, and you're a G2 fan, you're preying on BDS beating Fnatic 7-0, which would put Fnatic down to -2 on the round difference, joint on points with G2, and G2 beat Fnatic in their head-to-head in overtime in the first game of the season. So for G2, it's either Ents lose, but if Ents win, BDS needs 7-0 Fnatic. So out of their hands, it's with the gods now. We'll bring up their stats for G2 because I think it's not what we expected. Same with VP, fourth best rated team in the world. They made every single major last year. Granted, one of those was through the LCQ, but they made the stage at every major, top 4 at SI, and they played all their games and they're relying on results elsewhere. I think I put G2 up in my top 3 before the start of the season, but it's been, I mean, looking at the stats, your highest rated players are Alamal, Uno, and Virtue, with Doki and Benja down the bottom there.
Which is mental. Like, I just feel like there's a lot happening there behind the scenes that people in the support staff will probably need to address. Titan is my goat. I love Titan so much. All hail King Titan. There's a lot of work that he needs to do now, because potentially now is the time that we do make a roster change. I don't think it needs to be Doki and Benja though, and that may seem like a controversial opinion, because people see this and they go, oh, but the statistics. It's not all black and white though when it comes to Siege. It's not about it's not about, okay, this person is pulling a stinker. You need to consider how those players play and why those statistics may end up the way that they are. For example, the costs, realistically, yes, they're flagged there in kind of red and orange, but we still consider, if you're doing between 60 and 70%, that's still a good sign. So the cost is still as good as it can. Well, not good, but it's okay. It's not like they're super, super low where you're like, what, that you are just running into the building and dying,
I mean, I'd argue the main problem there for G2 is the entry. You've got Benja, he's taken 19 engagements, entry engagements, lost 10. Doki's -5 on entry. Your only player positive on entry is Virtue, who is not your player who should be. If teams are doing well, they're usually picking up the entry. And it seems, having watched a lot of the G2 games, it just seems a little bit disjointed. You see a lot of those sort of solo plays. I don't have the statistics on how many kills they get traded out on average, but it's very often that you see G2 in that disadvantage on the operator count in rounds, and it's happening too much, I think. Would you agree? It doesn't look like you agree with me.
I feel like those statistics are still fine to an extent.
Yeah.
And I think this is the thing, right? It's probably, when you look at, okay, if we're going to be really, 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 what's the word about it? Really
honest, brutally honest,
really picky about it.
Yeah.
Looking at that data, that's not going to give you the reasons why G2 are having the bad time.
No, I mean, you saw Fabian talking about it on desk, didn't you? You heard him saying, what's going wrong, Benja? And he was quite serious with him. Poor old Benja looked like a deer in headlights on the M5 or something.
That upset me a bit. Yeah. I'm not going to lie. I don't know why, but seeing Benja look that downtrodden actually broke something deep inside me.
Broke my heart as well.
The point is, it's when you have a roster and the data looks like this, it's that to me is already saying I need to go and actually go through the VOD and look at the qualitative side of stuff and not the quantitative. Because this is a problem with relying too much on statistics. Sometimes it doesn't actually give people the full picture of what's happening. Which is why, again, for Fabian to actually say what is going on there, absolutely bang on the nose. There's no point in looking at that and going, oh, well, clearly it's because this line looks very bad because it's in the negative. That's sometimes not how it works. And I feel like G2 are obviously one of the best teams in Europe. They've been known for being one of the best teams in Europe. They're the ones consistently at these events. And again, I feel like there's clearly something going on there that it's up to Titan that to fix now, really.
But I think the thing is, there's sort of been these concerns with G2. Like last year, they made one of the majors through the LCQ, and people were arguing whether this was the right team or not. But they just do have a scene. They seem to have a way of making it to these events, and maybe it's sort of been a long time coming because they've made these events since they won SI. They made every single major event, and they performed okay.
The problem with that, Ben, is okay. So is it that they can only perform when that cortisol kicks in, when they're like, shit, we've got one last chance to actually do it? Like, is that where we're going with that then? Like, okay, G2 can only perform when they're under pressure.
Potentially. I mean,
I
think
okay, why isn't that? Why, like, what is like?
You need to look into that, don't you?
Titan needs to be standing behind them with a literal cattle prod when they're playing main season and going, if you don't do well, I'm gonna zap you. Like maybe that's the vibe then that needs to happen. You know, maybe Titan needs to start actually threatening them with mutilation and maiming. That'll get the cortisol up, and then they'll actually, you know, like. It's one of those like sometimes teams do better when the back's against the wall. However, I will say that if that is the case where they need that extreme hormone change, that's a bit of a shame because that indicates to me that there's a little bit of stagnant energy in that roster now.
Maybe a little bit of complacency.
A little bit of like, you know, okay, well, we're here now.
Well, I think to sum it up, I think if they don't manage to make the major, I wouldn't be surprised if some changes happen. Because for August big as G2, not making a major, one, it really harms your chances of making it to SI because there's only 2 majors in a year now.
But again, like, you're not realistically, okay, you're making changes. It should not be Doki or Benja at all. Are you gonna risk if you were to do something like that? Okay, we'll drop like Benja or Doki, and then they'll go to another roster and take one of these rosters that have been absolutely slaughtering us, or like, you know, really getting everyone else on the ropes, and then make them 50 times freaking stronger. Like, it's that aspect too, where it's like, okay, are we about to drop someone just because of something, you know, really, really simplistic? Which again, I don't think that's gonna happen because Titan is one of the smartest people I know. There's too much.
I guess to summarize it, I think we are kind of in agreement there that there's stuff that needs to be worked on because it looks like the passion. I don't want to say the passion is lacking because I think some of the players demonstrate that they clearly do have the passion. It may be others that, who knows. But stuff that needs to happen behind the scenes, working on maybe the mentality and attitude towards it. And I think if they don't make this first major, I think we're both in agreement that changes will probably come in. Would you say that's fair?
Yeah, and whether that changes as a roster change or Titan threatening them with
a cattle prod,
physical bodily harm, yet to be determined.
Well, there we go. And now we get to move on to our next team, the new org coming back to Siege, Fnatic. Grace, Fnatic in a position where all they need to do to secure top 6 is not lose 7-0 to BDS. All they need is one round on Monday against BDS. And I expect on those player cams, when they get that round, they're all going to go mental and start celebrating. But Fnatic, it started off a little bit shaky. I mean, it started off quite impressively. They got a good result up against G2, but then a loss to Wild. It's sort of been an up and down season for Fnatic. But I mean, coming into it, a lot of changes to the roster. Jegs coming in, Tyrant coming in. And I mean, it was sort of roster at the start of the year that I was really excited about. Like seeing Leon Gids and Biggie T winning that Berlin major was fantastic. It's hard not to love those two boys. Jigsaw coming in as the Aussie import. And then Jegs, lovely lad, Tyrant as well, doing it at M&M, finding a new home. And I think if you look at that, it's pretty... You've only got 2 players under the 1 rating, Deepak and Tyrant, but Deepak had a really good game the other day. We saw Leon pop off massively as well up against... Who was it who went 15-3? He went 15-3 the other day, and it was unreal.
I feel like, first of all, I really hope that this makes people realise that Jegs is goated with the sauce.
Well, he's plus 15. He's only, what is that?
But
he's
again,
only 8 kills behind the most amount of kills of anyone in the league.
So again, this is going back to that, what I like to call mid-table madness vibe, which is like, when you look at the statistics for, 6th, 5th, and 4th place, it does not give you the full picture as to what's happened here.
No.
Which is why sometimes it can be a little bit dicey to be like, oh, Deepak's just under a 1, and it's like, he's still one of the best support players
out
in
there.
Europe.
I'd agree.
And I don't no roster is sitting there and going, nah, Deepak is washed. No one's sitting there and going, oh, this has been a terrible time for Fnatic. They've performed well. Definitely there's been underperformances, but they themselves are aware of that, I reckon. And they probably feel a lot of frustration with themselves for not being able to get over the line at some points. The main thing for this roster for me is, please, can we have a roster that doesn't change at the end of season from this lot? Because I understand that there's the element of being like, okay, we need to find our next Spoit because Spoit has left us now. Traitor. But it's
I'm excited about this roster. I like this roster.
Excited. I freaking love Jegs so much. I could sit here and monologue for about 2 hours about Jegs.
We're not going to let you do that.
I have seen Jegs.
I'm not allowing you to monologue for 2 hours.
I have seen Jegs fill a table at Spoons with empty glasses and win on land the next day.
Oh, there you go.
His ability to perform.
Well, I definitely want him to make Manchester now. They've got to make Manchester now.
That's it. First of all, Finland. So Finland buff. When it comes stuff like that. But my point is his ability to perform in really extraordinary circumstances is incredible. You've put that with Leon and Deepak, who again perform under incredible circumstances. Jigsaw, I think, is an incredible player that actually really surprised me because I was kind of feeling a bit not sure about this. Then over time, I've been like, okay, I see what's being cooked here. I see what's being cooked. Tyrant, admittedly, for me, I was this feels a bit random. But I do think Tyrant, again, has had some good moments. And I do think there's more to come out of Tyrant as a player. I think
it's just going to take him a bit of time to settle into the new team.
We just need to not mix it up again.
Yeah, I think that's the key for Fnatic. Stick with what you've got, because what you've got's good, but it's about making it consistent. And I think if Fnatic continue, when they look good, they look so good, but they don't look good enough of the time. Whether or not that's down to them, or is that just because of the league we're in, where anyone seems to be able to beat anyone, I don't know. I'd love to see how this team would perform on the international stage. I love my boy Leon and Biggie T, so I'm hoping they make the Manchester Major. Obviously, all they need is one round and they're locked into the playoffs.
But I feel like the Manchester Major, the main teams that everyone wants to see there is Fnatic and ITB.
Yeah, because it's a UK massive, isn't it?
The boys. That's what it is. Everyone just wants to see the boys.
The boys.
The boys.
Well,
I feel like this is and to be honest as well, for nostalgia's sake of almost reflecting back to the Berlin Major and, Leon and Biggie T being on that stage and winning, and then for that to happen again at Manchester, or even, for ITB for that to happen, the crowd would go absolutely ballistic. Yeah.
So in summary, Fnatic, we love them. We want to see them on the main stage at Manchester because of our UK bias. And please don't make any changes, Fnatic. What you've got is a good side. Work with them, let them grow, and they'll come up trumps.
Basically.
And speaking of the UK massive, we can now move over to... I'm very biased with them because I'm a content creator for ITB, but they've had some bloody good results. Starting off the season by beating Wolves. Then a bit of a disappointing result back-to-back, getting slammed out by BDS on border 7-1, losing to Fnatic. But then the next game week, they had a break, and then they came back into things by taking VP to border and beating border them on border 7-5. The day after that, they went on to beat G2 7-5 as well, beating Wild 7-2, then losing 7-5 to Secret. ITB qualified, definitely, for the playoffs. Kangaroo Kenny cooking up an absolute storm. And I think the thing that I've loved about ITB is they, unlike Wild, they take that gamble on that pot of T2 players, the up-and-comers, and craft them, shape them. You've got Oscar in there, Noah, who came obviously into TT9, but he was in that pot. Creed, you've taken from G, who's straight up there. Azza, and then you've got the experience of Kendrew. And I mean, I think that's the key thing is like we spoke about how you need that experience in your team, but maybe sometimes you're seeing like with the Wilds, they've gone maybe too deep on that experience. And Creed's, I know you hate your stats because you don't want to compare it to the stats, but Creed's having one hell of a debut season.
It's not that I hate the stats. It's just for mid-table stuff. It can sometimes be a bit janky. But okay, so there's so much I can say about this roster. Where do I even begin with it?
Azza is leading on entry, by the way, as well.
You've just touched on it, though. Like, okay, Kendrew is the papa of this team, basically. He is that veteran experience. He is that strong backbone. He is that stable pillar point for this roster. And that's been the same since they were TT9. And, you know, sometimes when I say, like, you don't have to make many roster changes, and sometimes it's best to, like, try and see that spark in certain players and, you know, sort of the whetstone vibes, bring the sharpness out of them. That's what we've kind of seen with Noah and their kind of growth over the last 12 months as well. And obviously, yeah, there's a lot of personal experience from my point of view with this roster, obviously. You know, majority of my plans last summer was severely fumbled due to the amount of work that they were putting in over summer. So, you know, there's a big factor there where on a personal level, know how much blood, sweat, and tears has gone in here. You know, Leonski all of last summer, I can't even begin to explain how many hours were going into, you know, things behind the scenes. You know, really ironing stuff out for stage 2. And then I really do think a high benefit has been, you know, Kangaroo Kenny coming in. I only ever have nice stuff to say about Kangaroo Kenny.
He's the
I absolutely
goat.
adore
Kangaroo Kenny is the goat. Shout out to my boy Kangaroo Kenny.
I think when it comes to Kangaroo Kenny, it's like one of those things where he is so good at being able to see the forest for the trees. And what I mean by that is being able to know that sometimes it isn't just, again, rudimentary little statistics and stuff like that. Like, it is just sometimes about actually looking at the qualitative side as well and being like, okay, this is clearly happening here. How do we make this better? And I do think he's also, it's that willingness between some coaches to actually try these younger players, to give these debuts to younger players. And I think that's a really important thing that Leonski and Kangaroo Kenny both shared. And again, you've got Kendrew there, who is that supportive pillar. And then, you know, Azza and Oscar, like, of course.
I mean, they're having one hell of a season, this pair, aren't they?
I feel like that was kind of one of those things where it's just like, okay, that was inevitable, really. For a while, that was kind of one of those things where it was like, yeah, okay, so yeah, that's going to end up happening at some point. And I do feel like, especially in terms of resilience from these players, because again, you need to recall how things were at one point for Kendrew and Noah at the end of that TT9 season. They were exactly in that point that probably that a lot of that world roster are feeling right now.
Yeah.
You feel
they were literally one of the worst performing teams ever, weren't they?
You literally feel like poo-ass. You feel like because it's not just like it's not just like, okay, yes, it's a team game, but you know, as a player, you really self-internalize that, right? And you feel like, oh my god, everyone's watching me and I'm doing so badly, and you know, they beat themselves and it's one of those things where it's really difficult to tell these players, like, you're not actually doing anything wrong, it's just like the team stuff and the vibes, right? And you know, that was something that over summer we started to see get worked out. There were a few T4 leagues that they were starting to iron out the kinks in while they were kind of going through different trials and stuff. And then stage 2, you know, that was a lot better, and people were like, okay, we see that there's some, you know, someone's cooked here. And then this has been really, really good for them, to the point where if they don't make Manchester Major, like, I will literally feel like
gutted.
Beyond gutted, to be honest. I do feel like out of the teams that should be battling it out, like, I really do think ITB, have it 100% in them to do something massive here. And I also feel like, obviously, when it comes to this game and, you know, the way that things go, obviously it's not to do with kind of storylines and the vibes that the audience want. But can you imagine if ITB are on the stage at Manchester Major on the actual weekend of Manchester Major as well?
That would be unreal. And I mean, they can still secure themselves third spot with Wolves playing secret in the... I'll get up the table. With Wolves playing secret in the final play day. If ITB beat Ents on the final play day, they go up into third spot as well. And I think when I did my predictions for the start of the season, I thought it might be a bit too soon, stage 1, for ITB to be battling it out with the big boys up in the top. But I think it's starting to click. And I think for me, to summarise ITB, they've taken that gamble on that T2 talent. They've sort of just broken them straight into the frying pan, and they're proving that they can hang.
And this is it too. It's sometimes like when you get these. Okay, I am telling you for reals. Like ITB, those players, they will try and do anything that you tell them to. Mm-hmm. They will try anything. They don't think they're above anything. They don't think that they you can suggest something and it's not like they'll go, oh, I'm not sure about that. If you suggest something to them, they'll do it, like behind the scenes. So it's like there's so much potential there still. I don't think, realistically, I don't think that roster's going to change after this stage at all.
No, it definitely shouldn't.
My brain would explode if it did. I'd be like, it doesn't make sense at all, unless someone retires, which again, I doubt that's going to happen. And again, I really do think that if they continue on this trajectory, like they could cause even more upsets going forward now. More upsets.
Well, I guess, for us, in summary, ITB, fantastic so far, and excited to see how they do in the playoffs, because they're guaranteed into the playoffs. And
parts where you keep being like, in summary, because I realise that I can't.
Our next team, one team that I am hugely excited about. We met all these people out in Malta, didn't we? And another team that's sort of taken that gamble on that sort of T2 talent. I'll bring up their stats now. Had a really good season. They can secure second spot in the league, which means all they have to do is win a best of 1. They will battle it out against Wolves on the 15th. Winner of that game will get second spot in the league. But, I mean, the man that I think has impressed so many people, the young head on his shoulders, the plant machine, 12 plants this season, Adrian coming in. Obviously, we've seen Charlie take up that entry role for ITB and do it impressively. I'd argue what Adrian is doing, where he's come from that Jihu roster, where he was the first entry, now switching over to the hard support, and he's still got the most kills on his team. And I mean, it just seems like the player who can do it all, really. And the rest of the team as well. Doom coming in also. It's a team which I'm really excited about. I mean, their first... Wait, why are you making that face?
Yeah, I was thinking, I swear, did we have an argument last night comparing Adrian to a certain other player and how Adrian found their footing quicker than that other certain player? Was I arguing with someone else about this?
I think it might be me last night, but I had too many beers. But I think for Adrian to come into a different role and perform the way he's performing just shows the versatility and flexibility of said individual, no?
You were right in that argument. I'm just going to point that out quickly.
Yeah.
You were right in that argument 100%. Like, you should, absolutely. Like, you were 100% right last night. Right, where do I even begin with this? Because this has been incredible. Secret have actually lived up to their potential here. That is the first point here. That roster has been one of those rosters where I've been like, okay, they are working really well together. They are cooking. Doom is a perfect example of a player where I feel like, not really having the best of time in Heroic, and then as soon as they go into the secret roster, things start going a lot smoother. We saw that at the start of the year. Things were looking good. You're like, okay, cooking, let's go. Adrian then going in to have the debut that he has had.
It's unreal.
Everyone and their nan should be on the phone to... I mean, I don't know who Adrian's agent is, to be honest, but it's not going to surprise me.
He's the hot
elegant.
property, isn't
But
he?
this is it. He is
Yeah.
he is the Pall Mall right now.
Yeah.
In Monopoly terms, like everyone is like, oh, I see. Especially when, like you've just touched on, changing roles and being able to perform the way you are when people always need players who are that versatile and also performing to a high standard. He is laughing right now. I wouldn't be surprised if Fnatic are probably slightly kicking themselves at times, being like, oh, but at the same time, Fnatic already have those two strong, supportive players.
Yeah,
but
well, all Wilds who were trialing Adrian and Creed.
You could slot Adrian anywhere. This is the point. At this point, we can all assess Adrian can do it all. Adrian can be adaptable. Adrian can change roles. Adrian can go wherever you need him to be. Adrian can put up the numbers. Adrian. One thing I will say is I will not forget the round in Malta where they got into the basement in labs. They got the plant down, and instead of covering the plant, I don't know what was going on there, but like there were a few moments like that where it was like fundamental Felicia would like a word. You're kind of like, those little sloppy mistakes are there. They seem to have ironed out a lot of that within a month, which is really good going.
Yeah.
To be able to work that quickly. But again, that is what you expect from a T1 team. However, when there's a lot of these rosters at times, sometimes people are not sure how they're actually going to end up performing. I think Secret have blown everyone away. I think Secret have really put their foot down, hit their mark. And again, realistically,
well, if they win on Monday, they secure themselves top 2, which means they have 2 best of 3s. All they have to do is win one of those best of 3s, and they find themselves at Manchester. My concern is that we saw this happen with Wild, where they performed so well in the leagues, well, in the groups, and then when it got to the best of 3s, it fell apart, and they didn't end up making a single major. And I pray that this doesn't happen for Secret.
It depends on how deep you've gone into a map pool, and I do feel like Secret have a decent map pool. They know themselves where they need to improve on some maps. And again, like the mistakes that they have been making have been these really silly moments where it's kind of like, it's not where it's like, oh my god, this is terrible and a really serious issue. It's just one of those like pants on head moment. You know, like that is their biggest detriment, is those pants on head moments where it's just like, what?
And I mean, like, they could have beaten BDS and probably should have beaten BDS. They were on defense at 7-7 and it fell apart a little bit and they lost that game. If that game goes...
can I just put out, like, to even, look at that freaking BDS roster, I'm sorry. To bring that roster of BDS to 7-7, that BDS roster to 7-7.
I mean, the proof will be in the pudding when we get to the playoffs. Because if we look at the table now, we have Secret locked in. They're in playoffs. They get that second seed if they manage to beat Wolves. Wolves, a team which we'll go on to next, actually, now we mention them. So in summary, Secret, we're very happy with what they're doing. Love that they've taken the gamble on Adrian, put him on a different role, and, well, he's the hottest prospect in all of Siege, in my opinion. The man who can do it all. That's in the recording now. Sorry, we just took a quick comfort break. I don't know why I'm saying that. But moving on to Wolves, a team that find themselves second place in the league and can secure second place in the league if they beat Secret on Monday, the 15th of April. Wolves seem to always have a way of getting to these events. And let's be honest, they were underwhelming and it went terribly out in Malta for them. And I think a lot of people, me included, put Wolves down in this sort of mid-pack madness.
Yeah.
And a lot, it seemed to, in the past, if Wolves did well, Mowgli would pop off massively. But this season, it's sort of been a different story, hasn't it, Grace? As I'll bring up the stats of the team of Wolves for you this season. Bosh, there we go. So Deadshot, Bibu, P4, all, if you want to rely on the statistics, all performing above and beyond Mowgli. I think it's always tough to look at a player like Shinka because he's doing the nitty gritty stuff, getting the plants down, even though he hasn't got as many plants as P4. But Shinka's sort of that player droning in players. He's never going to be your flashy sort of player. And I think a lot of people were maybe calling for a change in that Wolves roster. And I think P4 and Bibu have answered their critics so far this season because they seem to be the reliable ones. Deadshot, Bibu, and P4.
Definitely, and I think also a point to make there is even over the last few months, like Bibu and Deadshot have actually been the two highest rated, players in that Wolves roster. I know obviously Mowgli has had standout performances at times, but I do feel like he is underperforming a little bit on that entry. Yes, okay, you'll get some kills on the table, but you're immediately shut down, which isn't great. And then also like the trades, realistically, you're allowing them at times too much, and it could just be maybe a lack of information, a lack of comms in the team. But it is curious.
It could even be that sort of maybe a little bit of like overconfidence in oneself of their ability, where you've got that entry, you don't need to keep pushing. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, and I also feel like, there is the other side of that too, where it's like, you've got some of these other rosters now in this league where you've got players that can shut down that entry point really, really effectively. And that is also a big factor too. I think, again, the unpredictability of this season has been really good. And of course, when it comes to these entry engagements, we are going to see these entry players obviously struggle a little bit. It's kind of almost like a fall from grace. We touched on this earlier about how, Doki and Benja are doing as an example.
Yeah.
Statistically, and yes, stats don't always give out the full picture. But I think for sometimes with Mowgli, it's the consistency really. And again, Malta was a really strange one, like really strange. Granted, really, really fun for 86 to be able to do something like that.
I got to watch that one. I think I was doing it on my broadcast, and you came in and went mental as well, didn't you? Well, Gracie was just holding a Nerf gun at my face while I was trying to cast, which was really nice, actually. Yeah, thanks.
I have a point of view video of me literally just stood like this with like a Nerf gun, and I'm just shooting you in toast. But Deadshot, again, Deadshot's done such a good run of things over the last few months. Something that I do feel is, kind of expected for me personally. I do think Deadshot is a really good player. These issues sometimes with the French rosters is the same issue that BDS had for years, right? At BDS Wolves, they've always had this problem of they're a French-speaking roster. They speak in French. To pull into that roster, you need French players. That's always been a bit difficult to justify at times. However, I will say, obviously, with the way that ENTS has gone, previously, you've got that old Death Row Red Hood backbone there as well. There's now more French players to pull from. However, as well, you look at BDS, where some of those players were learning English a bit more to be able to have a mixed roster. There's a lot that could potentially happen in the future for Wolves. But realistically, it's whether or not they themselves want to stick together at this point.
Yeah, I think the thing is, Wolves just seem so hot and cold, don't they?
And again, there's hearsay as well. That's the thing, right? There's hearsay. Yeah. And sometimes you can put things down to just community gossip and things like that. But there is a lot of hearsay about how things are in that roster at the moment, and people kind of side-eyeing certain players in that roster, being like, what is the deal there? Like, what is actually happening there? Do I think that there'll be changes soon? Maybe, but I think people have felt that for a long time about Wolves, right? I think for a very, very long time now, people have been like, okay, surely there's going to be some massive roster changes, and it hasn't happened because they do keep getting onto
They keep making the events, don't
yeah,
they?
exactly. Yeah. They keep making the events, and it's one of those things where it's like, okay, if it ain't broke, don't fix it, you know? But at the same time, could they be better? That's the main question that everyone needs to be asking here. Could they be better? And the answer is yes, they could be better. The proof is in the pudding. You got Mowgli doing what he's doing the last 3 months again, and really not performing to the standard that he has done in previous times. So it's about kind of ironing that out, or working out why that's occurring, why that's happening.
Yeah, it's about finding that level of consistency, isn't it? Because
it's also as well, like, you need to work out, is it because the other rosters are shutting us down a lot more effectively now, or is it complacency again? That is the main thing.
Yeah. And I think that's the thing. I mean, Wolves win against Secret on Monday. It's realistically, they're the second best side in EUL statistically from the points they've gained, which I didn't think was going to happen.
But again, like spicy thing for you there. Okay, yeah, different roles entirely. But compare the statistics of Adrian on his debut to Mowgli.
Yeah.
Compare them in this league, and then compare them over the last 3 months. Adrian, clear.
Yeah.
Adrian, so clear. In both, both results of those.
Yeah. I mean,
data. So,
I guess to sort of look at it as a whole, I think Wolves, they need that consistency from Mowgli, and I think that would, if they find the recipe for that, I think they would be a much stronger side. But like we said, will those changes come if they keep making events? And I guess the problem is, maybe you then say, yeah, we keep making these events, but we're not making it deep in these events. And that might be where, if they do make Manchester and fall out at an early stage again, that may be the catalyst to maybe make that change. But they seem to be getting these results. And it's due to, I'd say Deadshot, for me, is the best player in that side.
Definitely.
When you look at it consistently, he's the best player. And P4, as a player who I thought, he didn't have a great time at Malta. I can't remember SI, but they were a little bit underwhelming at SI as well, Wolves. But he seemed to step it up and find that consistency, similarly to Bibu. So I think for Wolves, it's a tough one, isn't it? Because, like you said, if it ain't broke, do you fix it? Do you make that change? Because you might potentially make it worse.
Yeah, then that again, it's the factor of the problem that's happened a lot with these majority French rosters. You are really lowering your pool there for new players anyway. So it's okay, it's broken, we're going to fix it, but we have a really limited amount of resources to go off. And again, no disrespect to the French community at all, because the French players are absolutely nuts. Like, they're cracked. Like, the UK and France are probably the best regions for players in Europe. I think we can all safely say that, right? It says an irony there due to historical rivalries, I suppose. But like, it's this idea that they have really put a kind of dampener there, where it's like, we can only pull from here, whereas UK players can kind of go anywhere they want to. Majority UK rosters can pull from anywhere they want also. Will we end up seeing a kind of BDS 2.0 come from Wolves, or will we actually see maybe even a complete change up of the rosters? I don't think that the latter is realistically, like to change entirely a roster would be silly, because again, these players have performed to a very high and consistent level, and they have been able to qualify for events. And again, you do have Deadshot consistently putting in the work there. You just need to work out what the main issue is, and I have no doubt that behind the scenes, obviously, they know what the issue is. Their coaches will certainly know what the issue is, and it's just about fixing that, really.
I'd be interested to speak to a Wolves fan to know if they're happy with how it's going, because I guess, are you happy with just being, like, is it you're happy taking part, but you want to be competing? Do you know what I mean? Like, you're getting to all these events, but you're not seeing yourself go deep at these events. So is it, we're just happy to be there and make up the numbers? Or is it, I want to get that next, like, lock in that next gear and step it up, so we're making the main stage, we're battling to try and win these tournaments? But, I mean, I think that brings up a good point there. Speaking of a team that I think are truly going to battle for said tournaments, is going to be, and I mean, I said in Jesse J's Chick stream that if this team don't win an event this year, I'll chop off my toe. Because BDS, Grace, look, the real deal. I've got to be honest.
I feel like this might seem a bit extra, to be honest, if I say this, but it is actually true. It is actually a true and factual statement. When I got the leak of this roster, I actually jumped up and down, like, in real life. Like, I was very excited. Obviously, my first viewing of this was at Malta. I do think it was a little bit lackluster compared to what I was expecting. However, since then,
I mean, there's been one blip against Ents, and
which again we can put down to maybe either BDS not showing on the day or Ents being like,
just
going
full
to
sending
again,
it, nothing to
well,
lose, really.
it's a comfortable. Cafe is a very comfortable map for Ents. It's it's one of those, they can be very, very aggressive on that map, and they do, even on the attack, they clear very, very smoothly. And this was something they were doing against T1 teams from the start of the year as well, when they weren't even in Ents as a roster, right? So I think that maybe that does come down to the map pick there. BDS, it's gone decently for them. Well, I think that's an understatement.
It's gone bloody fantastically, apart from one
decently.
game, hasn't it?
Well, this is the thing, and again, like, it's sometimes for you to be on top. Again, this is why statistics can sometimes be a bit weird. Because statistics don't tell you the full story of what's really happened there. I think that they've put on a really good performance. I think things have been going really, really well for them. I think that they've had to contend with not only them being, all this kind of, I guess, pressure, but I don't really think they'd be feeling the pressure, but they are another super team, right?
Yeah.
And they are the first super team where you look at it and you go, no, this actually makes sense. These roles make sense. There's been so many super teams before where you look at it and they've literally just picked up a bunch of gunners and gone.
Well, you can look at M80 really last year.
There's a lot of times over the last few years where these things have happened, where these super teams come through and you look at it and you go, yeah, like, that seems very strong, but not in the full aspect of things. Some of these roles don't make sense. With BDS, the roles make sense. Everything makes sense here, and I think they've been playing so well. I think it's absolutely incredible that Shaiko, Liquefac, and Brede have gone, do you know what? Yeah, we'll just switch to speaking English now.
Yeah.
We're not going to gatekeep ourselves anymore from our full potential. And again, we talk about these new goals for players and stepping up and up and up even more and more and more. And I do think that is, a really big start to a chapter for this lot. A really big chapter. And again, I'm so happy that Usus and Solotov are still together as well in a roster. I think most people are. And again, I've kind of joked about this. I never thought that I'd see myself buying like a French team jersey. I've never ever thought I'd ever be buying a BDS jersey, and it's one of those things where I'm like, wherever Usus goes, I go, 100%. Like, I will follow that man till the ends of the earth, and it's been such a fun thing to watch. And I do think, first of all, this isn't even them at their full power either, which is the crazy thing.
It's their first stage together as well, so.
It's mental. It's mental. This is the thing. It's so crazy what is actually potentially around the corner here. I don't think people are fully letting that sink in. There's so much that can occur here. It's so exciting. They've done really, obviously they're top of the leaderboard, right? They're top of the leaderboard. Sending it now. There's nothing that's going to stop them from going to the major, right? They are actually in the major. They're in the major.
No, they're not yet.
No.
They're in playoffs, aren't they? So they have to win one best of 3. So they go into the upper bracket semi-final, and they have, if they lose that, they drop to the major qualification match. So they've got same 2 shots at the major. But I can't see. I don't know if it's just me hopping on the hype train of BDS, but for me, they just look. They obviously have that one hiccup against Ents, and I think they're not these people aren't robots. Like. I think.
But Ents as well have a lot of experience playing against them.
Yeah, and they played Cafe, I think, in the grand final of the LCQs for Malta, just like a seeding match against. Well, it was Valor at the time up against BDS, and I think that went 8-6 in the grand final of that with Ents. Well, Valor up against BDS. So yeah, I think it was a good. I think Ents did very well in that map. Sort of
you need to take with BDS as well. You need to take a map that if you're starting on the attack side in particular, you are comfortable taking those engagements.
Yeah.
Right. That is the thing too. And so again for Ents, Cafe, really, really with Ents again, like I touched on earlier, you are looking at Cafe, you're looking at Labs, you're looking at Border. They are very, very comfortable in those maps, and I think they trolled themselves by going a bit more safe at the start of the season. But for BDS, I do think that. Again, as time goes on, as their map pool becomes way more like diamond strong, that's where it's going to get real scary. However, the rest of the rosters have significantly performed. It's been one of the most, again, unpredictable Europe leagues in a very long time. It's been one of these it's just been insane. Like it's just been absolutely insane. Like this is the thing. Like, it's one of those things. Like if genuinely, I was touching this earlier. If you would have said at the start of the season, by the way, Virtus Pro and G2 are not even in that above the halfway mark.
Yeah, I mean,
like you would have gone. There's something wrong with you upstairs, and
I'd be like, you're lying. You're lying. Stop trolling me. And I think
was there technical issues or something, or did one of the players like have a technical problem? Did their screen what's going on there? Like, this is a very good sign. Everyone's going to get better. That BDS roster is going to get better. The standard in Europe is so much higher than a lot of other regions. It's going to get 50 times scarier.
Although this is the thing which I don't know if we're just holding EU bias, and I try and rein myself back in when I think this, because I think BDS are going to win everything this year. But that's why I'm so excited for this major in Manchester, to see if we just have that EU bias, or if the EU teams are really as good as we think they are. Because VP last year won stage 1, won stage 2, Swiss stage, didn't get past it once. And that's why I'm so excited to see, because in my eyes,
but I feel like I have SI this year felt very strange to me. Yeah. There's a lot of things that happen in SI that I was like, this already feels unpredictable. That's already when, in my opinion, G2 were underperforming.
Yeah.
They absolutely bottled it. Like, I'm not gonna, soften that word. They did. Like, I was so upset. Mental absolutely in the bin. I imagine that they were probably 50 times worse, obviously.
Well, I was sat in the front and with all the Brazilian fans sat in front of G2, and everyone, when I cheered the one round I think they won, everyone was going like that to me. And I didn't have much to cheer down there either, and it was, I mean, it's tough, that sort of away gig when you got 9,000 people up against you.
But that's why it's even funnier, right? That you right. I'm telling you now, a EU team is going to win the UK major, because there's absolutely no way in hell that every single Europe major that's happened since after COVID, right? Every single Europe major that's happened has been the EU crowd has been majority UK. You know this, I know this, because we've both been there. We've both been a part of that majority.
But that's why Copenhagen was so soul destroying, because we didn't even get an EU team in the semis.
Yeah.
Did we? And we only had M&M who lost out to W7M.
But I also feel like the crowd wasn't as concentrated at that event. And maybe it was the venue it felt wide. I don't know how to explain that, apart from it. I know what wide.
You mean. Yeah.
I feel like if everything was a bit more
condensed,
smushed, it would have been a louder, more enthusiastic crowd. But this is why the Manchester Major, because again, this is where So I don't know if you ever went to UK Prem, but it's not the biggest of venues, which is why it's even funnier that it's sold out, because that is going to be carnage.
Yeah,
and I think everyone knows it's going to be carnage, and you've got the massive strength coming through from these EU teams right now, where they're absolutely on fire. There's still the teams that can qualify, in their LCQs and stuff. So that's going to be even more insane. And then you're going to have other regions who are kind of coming in with a few more bumps and bruises from the get-go. Some of these regions have been really, really spicy.
I mean, the only team that seems to be continuing from where they were dominant last year is FaZe. Like, even the old W7M, now Furia, look a bit shaky, and that's why I'm so excited for this major, because it's in the EU. BDS are the best team in the world. They're going to win every major and SI this year, and I cannot wait to go to another event where I don't have to watch an all Brazilian final. Like, please. I've gone to Copenhagen, SI.
Realistically though, it's kind of this idea of okay, if the grand final ends up being EU versus EU, that is a very intense atmosphere to be. And I think it would actually be almost funnier for it to be an EU versus someone else final.
Yeah, I completely agree.
The
Because
entire crowd will be like,
it's
the
all with
venue
one
will be
team.
shaking.
Yeah.
And again, the thing is, I keep mentally trying to picture how this is going to look, because like, when I used to go to Prem, it was way more chill than what this major's going to be.
Yeah, I think it's going to get very wild.
Way more chill. You know, they have these big space heaters because it's like a cold room. You're not going to need those heaters because of how many people are going to be in that room. And it's going to be absolutely crazy. You've got BDS performing so well. You've got these mid-table madness teams who are going to be scrapping it tooth and nail to get through to the major as well. And that's where the excitement for me is, because again, like, you know, for me personally, like, what I want, not in terms of like prediction, because predictions are very much going to probably be different to what I actually want. Like, I really, really want to see BDS, ITB, and Fnatic
make the major
in that kind of like major position. Again, I'd say arguably mostly ITB, because majority UK team in the UK major would be really spicy and fun. But at the same time, like, a lot of the UK really were behind users and Solitov in that old org
for M&M
for obvious reasons. Like, it was a UK org, and a UK org that had been part of this UK scene for a very long time. I do think there's a lot of UK people, you know, in the community who would again follow users to the ends of the earth, follow Solitov to the ends of the earth. So, you know, myself included. Like, it really is going to be an interesting one. I'm really excited. I feel like this is, again, just so unpredictable, so mental, that it is really bringing back a lot of nostalgia for me, as weird as that sounds. Like, it's bringing back a lot of nostalgia, and that makes me feel kind of giddy in a way.
Let's go.
Like a kid at Christmas.
BDS on top, baby. So I guess to round it up, EUL, we think BDS are not just a super team that is super team by name, but super team by nature. Would you agree?
Yeah, because again, the roles make sense. Everything makes sense for this roster. They're only going to get better with time, and we're all going to have to buy BDS jerseys now.
I've already got one, so I'm sorted. But Grace, thank you very much for joining me. We've spoken a lot, and we're going to go play some DBD now anyway.
Yes,
but Grace, any final words before you go?
Very curious to see where Adrian ends up this year.
Yeah. I mean, if Secret make the major and they perform, I hope they've got a bloody big buyout clause on Adrian, because someone's going to come sniffing around.
No, there's no way in hell you're watching that debut and going, oh, whatever. Like, you are watching that debut and going, oh shit, we fucked up here. Like, we should have got this guy. Ooh, bit awkward now. Haha.
Well, Grace, thank you very much. And it's goodbye from me.
And goodbye from me.
And we might do more of these in the future as well. If you've enjoyed it, let us know. Thanks, guys.
Yeah.
Bye and stuff. Yap, 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 yap.